All right, everybody, welcome back. Again, my name is Dan Hendricks. Thanks for watching this. If you're on YouTube, check out my website here, danceofthecosmos.com. So let's get right into it. This is a continuation. This is part 7 of Karma, Fate, Free Will, and Astrology. This is the second video example that I'm using to kind of show how things fall in between Dridha and Adridha, between the extreme of fixed and the extreme of unfixed karma. Okay, so let's get right into it, shall we? So, in this example chart here, what we can see is just so happens this is another Virgo ascendant. And what we're going to see here is in the 4th house, again, Sagittarius, we've got Venus. Now we have a gentle planet. Although Venus is in enemy dignity. Why is Venus in enemy dignity? Because Jupiter's 5 houses away. The Lord isn't within 4 houses. Anyhow, so Venus is in enemy dignity. We see that Venus rules the 2nd and 9th, so it's actually not a bad planet. It's a good planet for a Virgo Lagna. And so it doesn't rule any Dushtanas or difficult houses. It's just a nice, gentle planet. It's just in a little bit poor of an Avashta here. I'm sorry, a little bit poor of a dignity, excuse me. And then we'll see the Rashi aspects. Well, now we have Saturn and Rahu aspecting that 4th house again. So this is kind of like the inverse of the last chart where we had a cruel planet in the 4th house in the Rashi chart. And we had Rahu aspecting. We had So in this example, we see we have a gentle planet. And we have Saturn, but then we have Saturn Rashi aspecting. And we have Rahu Rashi aspecting. So there still are going to be some emotional struggles. So now let's move on to the, real quick, Saturn's dignity here, Saturn that's Rashi aspecting this, is in a dignity of, Mercury's all the way over here, so Saturn's in a neutral dignity. So we see that it's not the greatest Saturn. It's definitely going to be a little bit more harmful, like, Saturn can be at times. So now let's look at the 4th Lord. So the dignity of the 4th Lord. Well, the 4th Lord is in a natural friend sign, but the 4th Lord is in a neutral dignity. We also see that the 4th Lord is in a Dushtana. It's in the 12th house again here. So that's going to kind of diminish its ability to produce. And then we can also see that it gets Rashi aspected by 3 cruel planets in this chart right here, Mars, Sun, and Mercury. But Mercury is always looking to manifest whatever he's aspecting when we're talking about Rashi aspects. So that's actually going to be a positive influence of Mercury. Sun is aspecting, he's a cruel planet, but this is Sun's sign. Sun is actually going to be manifesting this 12th house. But it's still cruel as far as Jupiter is concerned. Mars is cruel as far as Jupiter is concerned, but Mars is exalted. So Mars's energy is at its highest point. It's actually not really going to do as much to damage that Jupiter because of its higher dignity. Sun is in great enemy dignity, so Sun is going to be a little bit more harmful to Jupiter. Mercury is going to be a little bit more, well, Mercury is an enemy dignity. It's a natural neutral sign. So we see that, this Jupiter, it's kind of hurt, but it's not that bad because Mars isn't that bad. Sun is influencing, but it is Sun's sign that Jupiter is in. So Sun is actually trying to influence it. And let's look at the Shadbala graph. Let's see how Jupiter's doing. Jupiter as the 4th Lord is at 482 points, 124% of its minimum required strength. So it's a strong 4th Lord. And then let's also now take the time to look at Moon. How's Moon doing? Moon's Shadbala is 593. Okay, now this is a good looking Moon here now. We'll get into the Moon in a second. We have a couple more things, but I figured since we had Shadbala up, we should look at it. Now let's also look at Venus, because we're going to look at Venus later when we get into the Shodamsha. And also Venus is in this 4th house right here. So Venus, we see, has 469. That's 142%. So that's all 3 of these planets that are important for strong emotional nature are looking rather strong. So we can see that right away. there's a little bit of struggles. You know, Jupiter is, you know, we have these Rashi aspects are causing troubles, right? These cruel aspects, these cruel aspects. Then what we can also look at here is, so Parashara has these rules for a planet being able to manifest its bhava. Well, what Parashara says is if a planet is in Kumara or Yuva, which are two Baladi Avashtas, then it helps to manifest its bhavas. Well, Jupiter here we see is in a Bala Avashta, so that doesn't qualify. That's not helping Jupiter. Jupiter's in the 12th. Jupiter's in Bala Avashta. Jupiter's also not Rashi aspecting his own house. But Venus is there. Venus is going to help. It's a gentle planet. Saturn, Rahu aspecting. That's where we're getting hurt. So overall, it's really not that bad. Now let's get into the moon. Let's see how the moon is doing. Well, the moon is in its own house. We already saw the moon is the strongest in Shadbala. So right away, there's no planets Rashi aspecting the moon as well. So the moon's not conjunct any planets. So we can see that this is a lot healthier of a looking, of an emotional nature for this individual compared to the other one. But we do, this Saturn and Rahu will cause troubles at some point, right? Jupiter in the 12th, in Bala Avashta, not producing this, that's going to cause some troubles at some point, because Jupiter is going to feel this Mars to some degree, feel this Sun to some degree. But overall, especially with the Karaka for our emotional nature doing well, in the 11th, which the 11th, by the way, is an Upachya house, or an Upachaya house, and this is a house of increase. It's the highest of the houses of increase. So any emotional nature, any emotional problems are only going to get better as time goes. So let's dive further in. So this is the surface, right? This is the surface. This is what the person was born into. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the surface. Let's get into this Shodamsha chart. Oh, and real quick, let's look up our Lajatati Avashtas. So let's look at the Lajatati Avashtas of Jupiter. Well, we see that Jupiter has 482. Jupiter gets helped by the Sun by being in the Sun's Rashi to 369.7. So, and then gets helped by Mars to 298.8. But then it gets hurt by Mercury to 260 and Venus to 234. But it's getting helped way more than it's getting hurt in this chart. Nothing's taken down to a negative. And then when we come to look at the moon, what do we see? We see it's getting helped by the Sun to 359 and to Mercury 300. Both of its friends are supporting it. No Avashtas in the red at all for the moon. Moon is super strong as well. In the 11th house, house of increase. This looks rather nice. So let's go ahead and jump into the Shodamsha. So in the Shodamsha, we're going to look at Venus, the moon. We're going to look at the 4th Rashi, the 4th cusp. We're going to look at the ruler of the 4th Rashi, ruler of the 4th cusp. So what can we say right away? Well, let's look at Venus. Venus and moon are together here. Well, Venus is exalted over here in Pisces. That's a very nice place to have your Karaka. It's also in the 9th house, which is a trine, which is a good house to be in. It's got the moon, who's the first lord, and the sun, who's the second lord. So neither of these planets that Venus is with are planets that rule difficult houses, right? These are not Dushtana lords. Not the lord of the 6th, not the lord of the 8th, not the lord of the 12th. We'll see there's no Rashi aspecting that's going on here. And moon is going to be in an enemy dignity. Sun is going to be in a neutral dignity. So these planets might cause a little bit of harm to this Venus, but this Venus is Garvita. As far as Lajatati Avashtas go, this is a proud Venus. And we'll see that Venus also rules the 4th house here, or the 4th Rashi counted from the ascendant here. We'll see that Venus's Lord Jupiter is in the 4th house, so we have a 4th, 9th interchange. That is a wonderful interchange to have, but Sun is a cruel planet. Moon in this chart, oof, we're gonna have to go back real quick. I can't remember if it's waxing or waning. Moon is actually waxing in this chart. That's a great moon. It's a gentle moon. That's what we like to see, full and waxing. So we have Venus with a gentle moon, but a cruel sun. So overall, being exalted, that's a very positive Venus. And the reason we're looking at Venus is because we're looking at the Shodasha. We're looking at the Shodamsha chart. Venus is one of the most important planets to look at here. And then naturally, we can look at how the moon is doing. Well, the moon also is with this exalted Venus. And then it's also with this sun. So it's has one cool aspect. The moon is an enemy dignity. But overall, it's with this exalted Venus. And we already talked about how Venus is doing. That's great. And then we also know now that Venus rules the fourth cusp as well. Well, isn't that interesting? So the fourth cusp, the fourth Rashi counted from the ascendant, right? So here's the fourth house. We have Venus ruling that. So this gives even more confluence to Venus, or maybe more importance to looking at Venus. And now let's look at this fourth Rashi itself. Well, what do we see? We have a gentle planet here, Jupiter, and we have Rahu. See, Rahu and Ketu in the Shodamsha are always going to be together in the Shodamsha. They're always going to be together in the Vimsamsha. They're always going to be together in the Chaturvimsamsha or the Sadamsha chart, the D20 and the D24. And a couple other Vargas, it's always going to be like that as well. So we're only going to look at this Rahu influence, not Rahu and Ketu. So we're going to see that Rahu is here in the fourth house. So that's going to show some difficulties. But it's just going to show a little bit more confusion. And why do I say Rahu is just going to show a little bit more confusion? Because Rahu and Ketu give the effects of their lord. The effects of their lord is Venus. Venus is exalted, as we've said. So what that means, Rahu is always going to give us confusion, but it's going to take him to a better place. So this is actually a very good looking fourth house. Now, let's look at the fourth cusp. Well, the fourth cusp is aspected by these three planets, Sun, Moon, and Venus. Oh, now real quick, let's go back to how well is Venus going to manifest its Rashi. Well, we know since Venus is exalted, on some level that's going to help. But Venus isn't in the 10th, which is where we want a planet to manifest. Venus is in Dedavashta. Venus is in Mrita, which means Dedavashta. Venus isn't aspecting the fourth. We do have a gentle planet in the fourth, but Jupiter also happens to be the sixth lord in the fourth. As much as Jupiter's the ninth lord, Jupiter is also the sixth lord. So we do have Rahu, we do have a Dushtana lord in that fourth house. So there is a little bit of difficulties there. Venus isn't Rashi aspecting it. So this is a little interesting. Once you dive, that's why it's always so important to look at all the factors, add up all the whole agenda, the whole tamale, right? So now let's get back into this fourth cusp. Well, right away we see that this is a dual sign. This is Gemini. Mercury is not aspecting. So the Lord is not aspecting to help make it manifest. It only has the aspect, well, it has the aspect of two gentle planets, one of which is exalted, one of which is enemy dignity, and we have a cruel planet, Sun, aspecting, who's in neutral dignity. So we can see that, it's okay, but it's not great, but it's definitely not bad. And then we can also see here that the Lord Mercury is in the first house, but it's with Saturn. And we can see that, so this Lord is getting hurt here, and there's no other Rashi aspects. So Mercury is getting hurt by being with a nice cruel Saturn. And Saturn in this chart is actually in a neutral dignity. Mercury in this chart is actually in a great enemy sign. So we can see that there's definitely some hurt going on here. And here's the thing. When it comes to Cancer, this is a Cancer ascendant. Cancer is the natural fourth Rashi of the natural order of the Rashis. It goes Aries is number 1, Taurus is 2, Gemini is 3, Cancer is 4. So Cancer itself is the natural Rashi of our emotions, right? Because it's ruled by the moon. So we can see here that there are some struggles here because these two planets are in it. These two planets who are, the moon they view the moon as an enemy. This is a difficult placement Lajatati Avashta wise for both Saturn and Mercury here. So we can see that there is some emotional struggle going on. And we do have the 12th Lord in the first here, and we do have the 8th Lord in the first. So, and we do have the eighth lord conjunct Mercury, who's not aspecting his own sign. So we do see that, with that nice Venus, they're going to be able to make it down through the ups and downs pretty easy. They're going to find it to be better. But there's still going to be some struggles. And mainly what it is being able to get aligned, to find themselves in their path of life is going to be where the struggles are. It's that emotional nature of like the path and where they're trying to get to, and of feeling comfortable along their path. So that's kind of where the struggles here are going to be. So that's how we can start to kind of read this chart a little bit more. But overall, I would say overall, again, like in the last chart where I said overall, after looking at all these factors here, so Dridha, meaning fixed, unchangeable, Adridha, which means it's going to change like a leaf blowing in the wind. Well, and then having this middle, I would say that this chart is actually a little bit better. I mean, this is a person that's going to have greater ease working through their any emotional issues that they might have, and they're going to have some, and we all are. It's kind of a fact of life. And what I want to show with these two videos is I'm showing you two examples, one that's more difficult and one that is less difficult. That's going to take less energy to work through emotional problems. And one in the first chart in the previous video was showing one that's going to show that you're going to have that individual has more effort that they're going to have to put into work with it. So what I wanted to show you is when it comes to Dridha and Adridha, these are just polarities. These are extremes of karma. So, and the more that you look at a chart and you look at all the different factors that there are to look at, and this isn't even all the different factors. This is a pretty intense and pretty somewhat comprehensive way of looking at this chart. There's still a lot of other factors we can look at. In fact, it's exhausting trying to look at every single positive factor there is. And I even threw a wrench in the spokes, so to speak, when I talked about Cancer being the natural fourth Rashi. But in the Rashi chart for this individual, we saw that overall, this is a decent Rashi chart. It shows there's going to be some struggles, but everything is going to work out a little bit better here. So now, the things that I want to go away with this is that as far as Dridha and Adridha go, when you're looking at astrology, it's somewhere in between. It's almost always going to be somewhere in between. Very rarely are you going to see the chart where it's a super strong moon, a super strong fourth house and fourth lord that aren't aspected by any cruel planets or involving any Dushtana lords somehow or another, either through Rashi aspect or conjunction or by placement of the lord. And then at the same time having positive Shadbala values and positive dignities and being able to manifest its own, and the Lord manifesting its own house all the time. Very rarely do you see that, if ever. That would be a perfect Dridha karma. Or I'm sorry, that would be a perfect Adridha karma. And very rarely do you see it where there's nothing but negative effects upon all the factors. The moon, the fourth house, and the fourth lord. Very rarely are they all negative or all positive. This is why when you hear other astrologers like my teachers, Ernst Wilhelm and Ryan Kurzak, when you hear these guys saying to look at the chart as a whole, this is what they're starting to mean. And this is how karma ties into astrology. Because when you start looking at the whole series of how things can work out, you start making lists and you start thinking about like what are all the factors for something, you could start to get an idea of where it's going to fall in the scale between Dridha and Adridha. And yeah, so this is a great way, because what this is showing is that there's a lot of strands of karma to look at. There's a lot of strands that make up that prabdha karma. So because our lives involve so much stuff that's happening all the time, our life is never as simple as just, today I'm working on this 16-year dasha period, I'm only working on the first house. because it's the sun, and the sun rules the first, and that's all I'm going to work on is the first house. And I'm not going to have any other matter. I'm just going to focus on my body and my path in life and where I'm going. Unfortunately, it is way more complicated than that. It's every day we deal with all 12 houses to some degree or the other. In fact, all the time we're being influenced by things. We have multiple things in our lives growing and changing. So that's why it's important to always look at as many factors as possible. And this video is getting very long. So with that being said, this is the last video in this little mini course that I wanted to make on karma, fate, free will, and astrology. And this is how astrology ties into all this. So take what I talked about, the theory and the philosophy from the first 5, 6 videos, and now this is how we can put it into play and really see how life really plays out, and see that life is actually going to be somewhere in between these two extremes when we look at it. And this is the role of astrology, is seeing whether this person has to use more effort or has to use less effort to overcome some of these problems. And we're just looking at one aspect of life. So anyways, thank you for watching, and namaste.